Very good morning. Thank you very much for attending this workshop concerning elections. This beginning was quite unorganized, if you have somehow realized. There was nobody coming and saying, it's 9 o'clock, please come. There were no chairs there. And someone took over and asked, hey, is this meeting here? What should we do? The chairs aren't here. How should we put the chairs? And so on. That is a quite important lesson that we wanted to give with this little experiment. Self-organization and the way we want to do our company needs leadership from everyone. That means it's not that by self-organizing everything just works by itself, by whatever. And we see sometimes leadership reduces the energy we need to do certain things, to get certain things done. So as a short entry, and it's always interesting to see that some people take over and they just do it. Let us just follow. That's okay. But we have to be aware it needs someone who organizes certain things. And that's about elections. I wanted to give first a short introduction into what we do as a company, why we do elections, what the benefits, the advantages of elections are, what the challenges are. And then we will go through the day and also experience in the afternoon a short dry run of an election. That means you all will experience how elections work. When we're talking to companies, because we should be experts, yeah? We say we are experts in how companies should be organized, and sometimes it brings a little bit of laughing because obviously not everything is perfect in our company, by far not. Yeah? And we're totally aware of that. The question is, why do we do such things? Yeah? And why don't we just do it as every normal company does? And what benefits do we have? And the point is why we do that is when we look at the challenges companies face, and we most of the time talk about our customers, they have challenges. But we have the same. We know there's a lot of disruption in the market. Every company has a lot of competitors, and this disruption accelerates. That means it's more and more and faster and more pressure, and your customers expect more from you, and your competitors deliver more than you do, and so on. And then there's a new competitor, and so on. That means there's a lot of disruption in the market, how things work. And if you know how to manage a hotel chain 20 years ago, nowadays that changed. Taxi companies and so on. A lot of things that change. When we on the other side look how companies are organized, during the last 200, 300 years, more or less nothing has changed. Sometimes it was kings, then it was an emperor. In the tourism there was a manager. In the bureaucracy we always say, and nowadays we talk of circles, but at the end it's always the same. On the top there's a leader, and on the other side, on the bottom, there are the people that have to do these things. It's very cynical things, and I think some of you know that. The people on the top, if they look down, they only say shit, and the people on the bottom, if they look up, they only say assholes. It's quite a nice summary of how you could cynically look at this kind of management. That means when we look at that, the companies and how we organize ourselves haven't changed in the last 100, 200 years. And if you compare that with the tremendous innovation that is outside in the markets, it's obvious that we have to change how companies are run. And there are companies that are run better already and companies that are not. And those companies will be more successful who manage to go in this transformation. And we all feel the pressure. But the point is, we don't necessarily know how We should do that because in the future what we know is a company somehow will be more agile, more networked, less intermediaries, that means less managers, less staff. But on the other side, we also know that we still need to produce some things. And to produce things, you need to have efficiency, you have to have quality and so on. And that means it's not we are all going and we will all work in agile networks. No, we will have a combination of networks and how we organize ourselves, but also about clear structures. And that's quite a difficult challenge, and that is what we call shared leadership. It's quite interesting. We are living in a shared economy. We share everything. We share cat videos, we share apartments, we share taxi drives. The only thing that seems unshareable is leadership. There's always to be one boss and he decides or she decides everything and then it's good. That's how we learned it. And when we're talking about shared leadership, at the end it means everyone has to lead in his or her field. And even if we see there's a vacuum and nobody leads, someone has to take over and say, okay, I put the chairs here, for example. And on the other side, the flip side of this coin is everyone has to follow. If now someone takes over and says, here comes these chairs, then me as a chairman have also to follow this person, because there's a person that takes over leadership and we have to respect that and we have to support it by following. Because it's not so clear how this works. We have developed a map to understand where we do innovations and how we do innovations. Because when we're talking about innovations, it's always there first a lot of people that try certain things and they don't work. When some people thought, okay, now humankind should be able to fly. Then there were a lot of pioneers that tried to build airplanes. And you know all these funny stories. Even then, the Lake of Constance, there was once a pioneer who said, okay, this Sunday I will fly over the Rhine. And then there were a lot of spectators standing around and looking for this guy flying over the Rhine. And of course, it didn't work. Crash in the water, everyone was standing there laughing, ho, ho, ho. Doesn't work? Of course it doesn't work. Yeah, what a stupid idea. How should humans be able to fly? But all these mistakes, all these failures were necessary, that then at a certain point of time, two brothers, the Wright brothers, built an airplane and this airplane flies. And in this moment, it's absolutely clear, okay, it works. You can fly. The only question is how? How can we improve to fly? And that's the same now within our organizations. We know there's some change. We know we have to fly, but we don't know exactly how. And what we have developed as a company is a map that helps us to understand the aviatic of our companies. Yeah, that means what do we know already about our organizations and how can we then innovate in this area. And on one side we see, and you all know this quadrant, first is the question, what is the role of us as an employee? And it's a role, it's not my personality, it's my role. In certain areas I have the role of following. I follow others. And in other areas I have the role of leading. I lead others. And it's not a question of being a manager, it's a question of working in a company. In certain areas I lead, in certain areas I follow. And that's a change. When we started our quadrant, some of you know it already, we're talking about executors and creators or entrepreneurs, but at the end it's about following and leading. And both competences are important. That's one lesson that we have learned during the last year. And on the other side, when we look at how a company is done, is it controlled? That means you have the things under control, or is it self-organized? That means you don't have things under control as a leader. At the end, the system should be somehow under control, obviously. And when we look at that, then we have on one side command and control, and that works perfectly. That works perfectly. Without command and control and without scientific management, we wouldn't be able to buy cars, to fly somewhere and so on, because only because of this efficiency that is in the system, we could make things more affordable. And it's not necessarily bad. Command and control, for example, one who was very good in command and control was Steve Jobs. He could say, go that way, and everyone was following. If that works, if people follow and the leader leads in the right direction, it works perfectly. It's very, very efficient. But in a lot of companies, what we see are shadow organizations, because there are people that think they are Steve Jobs, but they aren't. And then people don't follow. They do things, they say, well, I know I should do that and that, but I have to make it happen, therefore I do it differently. We all know that even in our company, there's a lot of shadow organization, and we're all aware of that. Most of the time, shadow organizations are good because people do things that are the right things to do. But of course, in shadows, you can also sleep and nobody sees it. And you can also do bad things. And there are a lot of scandals that we know, Dieselgate from Volkswagen or banking scandals that happened in the shadow organization, because if I see my boss not following his boss, making creative interpretations of his orders, why should I follow my boss? If I'm a leader myself, why should I expect my people to follow me? Yeah? That means it's an erosion of authority. And then as we have to become more agile, to go better, we say, okay, we say organize yourself. That's something that's happening often in the organization, that they say, okay, organize yourself. And then what happens is total chaos, yeah? Because then we have to organize ourselves. And how does this happen? We sit around in tables. We have to bring everyone on the table I have to work with. And if someone says, sorry, I have no time, I cannot help you, I don't get these things forward. Everyone can say no, and nobody can say yes. Earlier days, we went to our boss, and the boss decided, okay, we go that way. Even if I was not happy with this decision, we went this way. Now, as we all say, okay, organize yourself, if there are no clear rules how to organize ourselves, self-organization doesn't work. We end up in total overstimulation. Everyone works with a lot of energy, but doesn't get things done. And of course, we say agile network, but agile network only work if people can lead, if there is a way how it is, and we have the right infrastructure. And the status quo in all of the organizations is that we have everything in our organization. The biggest problem is that whenever we think of processes, tools, and etc., and how we organize ourselves, we always think in command and control, because that's how we've learned it. And we have a big blind spot in how to organize the other things. For example, we as a company say the team recruits colleagues. We get often asked from other companies, how should this work? People are not experts. Don't they just hire the nice guys, and so on and so on. And of course, you can always discuss it. But the question is, if only a boss decides, if this boss doesn't hire the nice guys and so on. But not talking about that, a lot of people do it naturally. They involve the team, even though it's not the process. But we don't have the tools, we don't see how it should be done, we don't know how to do it. Everyone does it more or less out of a natural talent who wants to do it like that. And what we have to learn is we have to find something like an operating system that on one side has good command and control, and on the other side also elements of agile networks. And if we have both, and we know to navigate in both areas, that means for each and every one of us, it means sometimes we have to follow here, sometimes we have to lead, and sometimes we have to organize ourselves together in a group. And it's not clearly one or the other, it's always everything. And that's quite a challenge for all of us. And just to give you an example, if you say command and control, if we would ask you to draw control, make a picture of control, we would probably draw a policeman who measures the speed we are driving, and if we are too fast, we get a fine. That's how we understand control. But there was innovation in that area. We all know this speed display plates. We drive, they are green and smile if you're driving with the right speed. If you're too fast, they're red and they're looking bad. And the interesting point is just think a little bit of what this means. First of all, it is proven that drivers reduce the speed with this speed display. First of all, this information is redundant. Yeah? On the display, you see the same information as in your car. No new information. Most of the people know you don't get flashed, you don't get fined. Nevertheless, you reduce the speed. Why is it? And there are a lot of explanations. One is because this information is outside and is transparent, I know that others could objectively see that I'm too fast. And that makes me to think slow and say, okay, well, I don't want to be too fast, and therefore I reduce my speed. That was not possible 20 years ago because the technology was much too expensive to put it on some places. Now it's possible, and therefore we can do control differently than before. Now try to transfer that into companies. Some companies have expense rules that are big books more than the traffic rules. And then there are policemen in these companies trying to see if everyone was expanding rightly, not to lavish dinners. And now there are some companies that say our rule for expenses is what is in the best interest of the company. Just one sentence. And they provide transparent information. That means everyone in the company can see every expense slip, from the CEO to the portier. It means, of course, it's transparent. And then what's happened, first, it's starting self-control. If I'm normally going to lavish dinners with some of my colleagues and expand that, then I know, oh shit, that could be seen by my colleagues. And then I start self-controlling. And on the other side, if I have a colleague that I think, wow, this colleague is surely not it's spending too much from our expenses, then I can have a look at. It wasn't possible earlier days because we could not organize it that everyone could go into the finance department and look in the books. Yeah, but now we have technology, we can provide that, and by that we can do different controls. That means command and control is not evil, but we have to modernize also command and control, how this works in the future, how leadership and followership works in an efficient way with new technologies. And on the other side, when we're talking about self-organization, traffic is a very good example there too. Nobody tells you when to drive, where to drive. Except you're married, but that's a different story. Yeah? But there are no rules. There's no master car that tells you where to go. But why does it work? First, there are clear rules. I drive on the right side of the street. If this rule wouldn't exist, with every encounter of cars, you would have to decide to go be right or left. There would be a lot of accidents, there would be a lot of frustration, and the traffic wouldn't go smoothly. It would be slow. But with this clear rule, it's an important thing for self-organization. That means clear rules. Then you have to have the right infrastructure. You cannot drive your car on the trails of a train. You have to have roads, traffic lights, and so on. Yeah, that means you have to have the right infrastructure. And you have to have the right competencies. And competencies, what does this mean in traffic? We first learn the rules, and we go to a driving school. And there first we drive, and we have someone beside us who knows how to drive and who helps us. And then once we feel comfortable and we know how to drive and we know the rules, then we make a test. And once we have the test passed, we get a driver's license, a license. And this license allows us to drive. And nobody can forbid us to drive. Even if we do an accident with parking, or even sometimes if we have injuries in an accident, but we didn't do it in a bad way, we keep our driver's license. In companies, of course, if I did it in a bad way, then it's taken away, absolutely. But we know that in these systems there are accidents, and we have learned to cope with that. In companies, whenever we do and we allow someone to do something and this goes bad, then we say, I have known it, I take away the license. That means what we have to do is we have to find the competences in the meaning of knowing how to do and being allowed to do. And then an agile network works. You're right. I say, okay, you can drive yourself. And that's what's happening often when we talk about self-organization. We say, okay, now you were now all driving in trains, but now everyone gets a car and you can drive yourself. There are no rules, there are no driver school, and everyone starts to drive. And some driving quite okayish, yeah, but in Wild West, and others don't dare because they cannot handle it. And then there's happening one accident, and obviously there will happen accidents, especially when you do it like that. And then the others say, okay, I have known it, it doesn't work, everyone back in the trains. That means we have to learn how to work and how to organize ourselves. That's what we are doing as a company. We are trying ourselves to be innovative, to try new ways. We try to fly. Sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. We try to learn, we try to iterate, we try to improve, and we try to find an operating system that covers modernized command and control and agile networks together. And our elections and to elect our leadership is one element of this endeavor to find an operating system. And just to make an example, because it's not so abstract, when we're talking about an operating system, and let's talk about decisions. Who does decisions how? Outside of a good operating system, we say would be this dictatorship. Someone saying, don't think, just do. I don't want to hear your opinion, just do what I tell you. And that's a dictator, out of our opinion, outside of a good operating system. But within, there are several areas. One is, I as a leader can say, I decide. I decide. I don't ask anybody because I decide. But at least I have to explain to the people that have to follow me because they have to follow me. And if I understand that following is a voluntarily act, as a leader, I have never the possibility to force someone to follow me. It doesn't work. Probably people will seem to follow me, but they won't do it. And therefore, it's not leadership. It means at least I have to convince the people by explaining. Or if I'm Steve Jobs, out of my genius. But just to say, there are not 20 Steve Jobs in this room. So then there's also the possibility to say, I involve people into this decision. I ask them, let's sit together, what is your opinion, what is your opinion? I hear the opinions and the proposals. I make, as a leader, the decision, and then I communicate the decision. That is involving, but it's still me as a leader doing the decision. And then I can switch to self-organizing, and then as a leader, I get a different role. I'm not the one who says, okay, decide yourself. For example, one of the best examples is, okay, you're in the support team, we have to do weekend shifts. Please organize yourself. That's a very bad way of delegating decisions. Because how do you then decide? And then you're in consent and it's really bad and you produce a lot of bad energy in the team. If you say you want to do that and you really say the team should decide, then I as a leader should support with, for example, some rules how we can come to a decision, moderating the decision process and so on, to make it a good decision at the end, and I support. And if it's really then a team that is used to organize itself, then it can also do some decisions by itself. But then this starts first with the Rütli-Schwur. In Switzerland, when they said, okay, we organize ourselves, they first defined the rules. And then they started working. And it's not, okay, we do ourselves and then it's chaos. That is Egypt and other Arab Springs. first we free ourselves, and then because we don't have rules, it doesn't work, and then we go back to tyranny and to worse tyranny. That means if we say we want to organize ourselves, then we have to define our own rules, how we do it, and we have also to make sure that it works. Because if not, we end up in chaos. Nobody knows what to do. That is how we see an operating system, and that means whenever we are talking about leadership and followership, we have to be aware in what level we are working here. And one of the things that is inherent with elections is we are electing leaders. And leaders have to lead. And if we elect leaders, we have to follow. That's something like a contract. And what does this mean? When we say leading, and whoever leads, there are a lot of good advices what good leadership means. I don't go into that. I just go into the things that are special if you have such an operating system as we have. If you take over leadership, make clear that you take over leadership. Say, I understand, I'm leading that. I'm taking over responsibility, I lead that. Clearly stating to whomever is affected by your leadership. Then decide how you want to lead in this specific area. Is it something I do and others have to just to follow me, or I'm more integrated, or am I the moderator of a decision of the team, whatever, to make yourself clear in every decision you do, how you do that, and communicate how you do it and what your expectations are. Because it's easier for others. And if you take over leadership, it's very important, don't delegate unpleasant decisions. That is part of leadership. Take over unpleasant decision. Except the team says we want to take over and it works, then it's fine. But it's not about, okay, I take over the decisions I like and the other one I delegate because we are self-organizing. That's bad leadership. And also, what's also sometimes happening, we take over leadership and then we forget about it. If you take over leadership over certain things, then you can only stop leading in that area once you have handed over to someone else. You cannot just drop it. And if we talk about following, we have to be aware that we as followers decide of the success of a leader. That means we have to have the aim to make the person that leads successful. And I said it's not only about the CEO who leads or the unit leader that leads. If we have decided someone leads in a certain process, then also I have to follow. Everyone has to follow because we have said this person leads. And that means when we see something not going good or we think we should do it better, then we provide feedback and input, but that's a gift. Yeah? We say, okay, I tell you, I would do it like that, out of that and that reasons. But if the one who is responsible decides differently, then we follow this person. And we should wait and see what's happening. And that was something that I really had to learn. And nowadays talk about brain farts, because we are always tempted when we hear something to give our comment. It's like a brain fart in that moment. And we all don't want to fart. But in these things, we hear something and we have immediately an opinion and have immediately the opinion, we know it better. But we should wait. There's a person that has spent significant time probably to decide that to go that way. And therefore we should follow. We should say, okay, if we're doubting, we don't know, then in the doubt for the, I don't know how it's in English, in dubio pro reo, yeah? Okay, now everything is clear. Now, if I doubt and I don't know, then let's follow because it's more efficient. Because we say we define leadership and whoever leads should be able to lead and then we follow. Because what I realized when I was stepping down the first time very consciously and then following Mark as a leader in the position I had before, I often thought, oh, that doesn't go well. But then I waited. I provided feedback when I got asked, and I waited. And then I have seen that his way has led at least to as good result as I would have expected for my. Then it's good. It means let's surprise yourself in doubt. And there, of course, there are areas where you should not follow, but you have to, out of my perspective, clearly answer 3 questions with yes. Is it really important? If it's about if the chairs are in two rows or 3 rows, sorry, it's not important, then I follow. If it's really important, if I'm really convinced my way is far better, and if I'm also convinced that what the other is doing will lead to disaster, then I don't follow. But it's quite hard criteria, because that's something that we have to learn. We have to understand that as a company, we can only work efficiently if we say there is clear leadership and also clear followership. That is very general, yeah? And that means it's also for someone, for example, if someone leads the CI, yeah, how we do presentations. Of course, I have sometimes the ideas I would do it differently. But I ask myself, is it really important? Is my way much better? And would the other way lead to disaster? And then I don't follow. And if not, I follow. I always can ask, and that's where we have elections. I can always, every year, try to make my candidacy for a certain position. But the moment we have defined a leader, we also have to follow. And as said, it's not that you have to sit on your mouth. You have to provide feedback and input. In doubt, let's see, but it's also your obligation not to follow. If you're convinced it's important, your way is better and the other is really leading to disaster. And if not, there are so many things, even if you are convinced you are smarter than the person that does it, you have more experience than the person that does it, and you know this, what you would do would be 100% better solution. If we say there is a person who is responsible for leading and we have defined this person to lead, then we have to follow, because if not, an organization doesn't work. And perhaps this person will surprise you and have a good result. And even if your solution would be better, if this person follows your solution half-heartedly because it's not convinced, and does the own solution that is intellectually not so good, but this solution is followed with full heart, the result will be better, nevertheless, because it's with full energy. We have to be aware of that. That means we have areas where others lead, and then we let them lead and we follow. That's a really important part, and that is something that was lost in our company when we get this external tag of we are a democratic company. That because everyone thought that he or she can talk everywhere and decide everywhere. No, we have to define where we decide all together, and where we have defined the leader, and the leader can decide how to lead in this area. So, and that's why now coming to some misconceptions about elections. First, when we're talking about we're a democratic company, we can discuss this term yes or not, but we are branded like a democratic company. But democracy is not leaderless. We always lead leaders in a democracy, even more leaders and even stronger leaders, because you cannot just order, you have to have the others that follow you. It's a different kind of leadership, but we have leaders in a democracy. It's not a company without boss. Absolutely not. The opposite. Because we as leaders understand that we are only leaders as long as people follow us voluntarily. Everything else is not leadership. Self-organization is not unorganized. It's in the word, but nevertheless, we often think self-organization means organize yourself. That's stupid. We have to have really clear rules, rituals, roles, responsibilities. It has to be consistent, always driving on the right side, not sometimes right, sometimes left, and so on. And we have to have the competence in the meaning of qualification and authority. If not, self-organization doesn't work. If leaders take decisions without consulting, that is not undemocratic. It was the call of this leader to decide, I do this decision. And then we should try to follow. There was a good example in our company. There was a decision what phone system we're using. And of course, the people working in the support and also in consulting, they use this phone as their daily instrument. And I, as a leader, can decide I consult everyone and then decide. Or as a leader, I decide. And if I then one day get a new telephone because this leader has decided to do it by himself, then I should not first do my brain farts and say, what a bad decision. I should start saying, okay, this guy did probably a very conscious decision. And therefore, I should try to follow and not say, well, that's undemocratic, I don't follow. Something we were discussing yesterday, is it slow? Is it too time-consuming to do joint decisions? Is it distracting from work? On one side, when we're talking about joint decision, it's a huge difference between consent, that can be an endless process, and majority, that's time-boxed. We say, then we do the decision. Before we can decide. And that means on one side it's time-boxed, that means we get to a decision. On the other side, the time of implementation of what we have decided is much faster, because everyone has understood why we decided that way, and even if I don't agree, I accept that the majority wanted to go that way, and therefore I follow the majority. That's part of the rule. And the superiority of this system comes not even from a faster implementation. But in a lot of companies, the time till you realize that you have to take a decision, most of the time the shit already has hit the fan, thank you. Yeah? That means it's already a big disaster that on top we realize that we have to take a decision. In a system where we do jointly decisions, these problems come up earlier. That means we can decide earlier, and it's not so difficult to solve them as if it's already a big disaster. That means it doesn't make sense for every decision. We also had one decision about a fridge in the third floor with good food in it, and it was a decision of 1,500 francs a month. There's someone who can just decide it. We don't have to make a democratic decision out of that. But whenever it's important, then we should do that, because we know at the end it's not slower, it's faster. Now talking about elections, sometimes, and we will have a lot of elections in this round again, where we only have a single candidate. And then what I've already heard often is that's pseudo-democracy. If I have only one candidate, that's not democracy. It is. Because the most important feature of democracy is to vote out a leader who doesn't work anymore. Came to his limits, whatever, was too long, too successful, out of whatever reason. And that means this possibility you always have. You always can say, I vote out the leader. And of course, if there's something not going well, they bring up the tension earlier. And the other thing, the other pseudo-democracy is something that I've heard from employees about our system. And the new term I have learned during the last year was employee tyranny. Because the employees now are ruling over the leaders, because they can always vote you out. It seems there is some fear of the elected leaders that they cannot do the right decisions because then I get voted out. And all experience that we have, at least in our small company, is that people don't vote you out for the right decisions even if they are unpopular. People vote you out if you're unfair, if you don't behave properly, but not because you did the right decisions. Now, because you can ask yourself, would you vote for a weak guy who is always nice to you but doesn't get things done, or a strong guy who also does decisions that you don't like, but you know it brings you forward and you will be successful with that? Everyone says, of course, I vote for the strong guy, but all the others vote for the weak guy. That's not true. It's not true. But of course, you have to experience it first. And it's so easy to say, if I get a bad election result, it was because I did the right thing, but people don't like me. As a good leader, I do the right things. I can convince people to follow me. And also one thing about these elections and all this stuff is the ego is not the hardest part. Yeah, that I lose my ego. The hardest part is about losing control, because you're responsible for something and you lose somehow control because you give it up to others. And that's quite a big challenge. And the last thing, already talked about it, if you want to delegate, it's not about the unpleasant things that you delegate and to make you more comfortable, but you have to do the right things and you have to support. That means delegation most of the time takes more time than deciding yourself. Okay, coming to elections. Why do we do elections? When we started the company, as every startup, a startup is flat. Yeah, there are 4 people sitting around the table and every decision is done by everyone. You just discuss it on the go. And normally, as companies grow, they become more divided in apartments and departments and areas of expertise, and then someday not everyone is deciding on everything. Of course, it's more efficient. And we, just as a company, we kept the idea to have decisions by everyone for the important things. It shouldn't be about if it's a fridge in the 3rd floor or not. It shouldn't be about 2 lines or 3 lines of chairs. But the really important decisions we take together because we think that is important. And then there was one time, and we did a lot of other things. Yeah, we decided to go together with the Haufe group. It was a democratic decision, a lot of other things. And also our product strategy was more or less bottom up. And then it was the time when I stepped down and wanted to propose my successor. We then said, that is an important decision. Who is the CEO of a company? And therefore we wanted to ask all the employees. Everyone should decide. And that was the first vote. And for us, it was a one-time event. Because CEO is then decided, fine. I was CEO for 12 years. Next CEO is also sometime, and someday he will resign, and then it's the next decision. But interestingly enough, a few months later, there were other leaders, team leaders, coming and saying, I want to be elected too. And you have to think of that. They already had this position. They were saying, I want to have an election. The only thing that they could win was the position they already had. And they could lose their position. Nevertheless, they said, I want to be elected. And then the whole leadership team said, we want to have these elections. That means there has to have been something they were experiencing with the election of Mark that they said, I want to have that too. And obviously one very obvious thing, and they will come to others, was that you have the backing of the team. Yeah, you know they stand behind you. And therefore, they also wanted to have that. And then we did the repetition, and we do it now every year, and we are still learning every year and improving the process every year because we know we are not perfect yet. And for example, that is also one big experiment what we're doing now. We said everyone who wants to vote the first time has to go in a driving school. And that's now the driving school. Understand the rules, understand the ideas behind, and also making a dry run. That means you probably will be better prepared for the elections and the consequences of the elections than the ones that came the year before you, because they just experienced it once. They were driving without understanding the rules and how this works. Okay, advantages. Why do we do this election? What we have learned why it's good to have elections. On one side, the backing, that's clear. Yeah? I feel the backing of the people, therefore, when I'm elected, I know people will follow me. That is part of this contract. My role becomes clearer because most of the time what we experienced when someone gets promoted as leader, there's something like a very strange behavior happening most of the time. The first time you become a leader, even though you were working in a team, we were totally flat and you wanted to have a very collegial leader, the moment you get the leader, you become a very archaic tyrant. I have seen that so often happening because it's clear now I'm the leader. I have to lead, I have to decide, I have to make no mistakes, I have to tell the people and so on. That means I change the position and everything changes. And by having this discussion, at least I have to think through what is my role and what is expected from me as a leader. It's not just, okay, now I lead and nobody knows exactly what it means. I have to think through and I have to explain it. And also we as people that elect the leader, most of the time, even especially in difficult situations, the leader is always the one we complain about. Huh? If something doesn't go right, he's an idiot. It's quite easy because we have to have a scope. And when we listen what this person wants and we can provide feedback, we clarify the role of a leader. And we also synchronize expectations. The leader can state how he or she wants to lead and what you can expect from him. And you can also state what you expect from this person. Normally, a very good leader out of natural talent would do exactly that. When he takes over a new team, he would go, listen to expectations, state their own expectations, and then start to work. But as we have still this command control, I was promoted in a position and now I lead, and that's how I am, and I'm Steve Jobs or Napoleon. And with these elections, we clarify expectations. That means it's not only about voting for someone, even if it's only one candidate. You can use this election to explain what expectations you have to the boss, to your leader. And even if it's the next year you're reaffirming the same person, you can say, that is what I'm expecting from you the next year. And it's also important for me every year to think through, am I the right person for this job? And what is now expected from me? And just to write it down and to explain it is very, very important to increase leadership quality. And also quite interesting point is we are listening better. We experience it often in companies when we provide a 360-degree feedback. Yeah, we know that leaders get feedback from their employees. Most of the time how leaders react to that is they read it and say, who was that? This was this guy. Okay, forget about this feedback. That's a very natural behavior. The moment I know this feedback is connected to my fate, if I'm still leader or not, I listen better to this feedback. And vice versa. Imagine the moment you would be in this group when I was explaining that I want to hand over the CEO to Mark Stoffel. Imagine you're sitting there, I'm coming in as co-founder and CEO and say, okay, from tomorrow, Mark will be your new CEO. And now I explain you why. Everyone stopped listening. Everyone thinks, why this idiot? Why not me? Are you crazy? Why don't you want to? Etc. We don't listen anymore because we just complain about this decision. The moment we can decide, we listen. That means we're listening from both sides much better. These contests and these discussions improve leadership because we understand better what other makes, we learn from each other, And it's also for you a way how you can own your own career. That means if you think, I want to be leader in a certain area, you can nominate yourself. You can say, I want to be that. I want to be the CEO. I want to be whomever. That is one. That means you can take it in your own responsibility. And you get also feedback. We had once a candidate who said, I want to become manager of a certain team. And then we have a process where you first get a feedback from some others. And then one of the team asked him, hey, okay, you want to become the manager of our team. How do you think you can do that if you cannot even manage yourself? And it was a very valuable feedback. And then this person said, okay, probably I'm not the right manager. That means to get this feedback from your colleagues and not from the boss. Because if your boss says, well, I don't think I should promote you, then I think this person has something against me. If I get it from my team, I'm probably more open and I know where I can develop and where I should develop. As I said, if we don't elect anyone, we vote someone else. It's also an election. It's very important. And we have yearly limits. That means we know we vote every year. That means even if you have a leader that is not so good, you somehow endure the problem because you know there's an end date. Because normally, if you don't know that in a normal company, you don't know how long your boss will be your boss. And then you sometimes decide to leave the company. And with these elections, we can keep good people because on one side we know there will be an end of this problem if there's a problem. And on the other side, even the good people, there were some when good because they became leaders. They can step down and become normal part of the company again, that in normal companies doesn't work. We call it the spiral career or agile career ways that become normal. And of course, there are some challenges with that. On one side, as said, if we elect leaders, it sometimes puts the wrong expectations. And we expect we get asked for everything because we vote for our leaders. To understand, we vote for our leaders, but then the lead is difficult. It was difficult for us to understand it, and it's difficult for everyone to have it in the daily life. Of course, there is a danger of negative campaigning. It's a question of personalities. But if there are two candidates, it happens that then people start talking about why the others are bad and not why I'm good. We have to be aware of that. One really difficult part is if you get elected as a leader, but with a very close result, very closely. Then your people know, hey, this guy was almost not elected. That is sometimes difficult. Some candidates that get elected closely use this as a positive thing to improve. And with others, it deteriorates faster because they become uncomfortable. The people know, hey, he's almost falling, and then something happens during the year. But at the end, it's also a process that helps. It can lead to paralysis of leaders. That means I don't feel comfortable anymore to take strong decisions because I think I get voted out. Although it is not the case, if I think it is the case, it will not help me to be a good leader. And at the end, sometimes you have hurt feelings if you see results that you didn't expect, that of course it's a personal thing. And that means we always have to know, and we should never forget, these elections is about humans. It's not about machines. It's not about people we hate. Everyone is a human, and if we vote for someone and if we vote someone out, we have to be respectful. Because we somehow lose that, because when we do elections in the political system, and then we say, okay, now we vote for Trump, or we vote for whatever, and then but to understand that these are people, at least in our company. That was a short and very compressed, I'm aware, part of why we're doing such crazy things. Summarizing, there's a lot of innovation going on, and we have to innovate how we organize ourselves. And therefore, we're doing that, and we have to be aware these are experiments, and we have to improve them regularly, and we think certain things work, certain things don't work. Election is something that we have learned. They work somehow, and we want to proceed in that, but we have to improve on that. And one major improvement that I want to bring into this company this year is about to understand that is about leading and following. We only make our leaders successful if we follow them. That's something that we have to learn. It's not because we are electing our leaders we don't have to follow them. And it's not because we are electing our leaders they are our slaves. That's something we have to learn and we have to understand. And as you are the only one now going in this tribal school, you have the one to explain it to your colleagues that don't understand it. That's your responsibility here. You lead in following. Okay, that means we have to do these experiments and innovations because things change and we want to be ahead. We did it, it just came, and a lot of things just happen, but then we learn why it's good. We have seen there are a lot of advantages in it, but there are also disadvantages that we have to be aware of. And that was now a very long introduction, and thank you.